I was 9 years old when I watched my mom's ribs break like twigs beneath my father's fists. I can still hear the crack, not just of bone, but of the last piece of safety I ever knew. It was a Tuesday. The kind of day where everything feels ordinary, until it's not. She was stirring pasta. He was pacing, muttering. Something about bills, again. Something about how she never listens. I remember the heat of the stove mixing with the heat of his rage, and then, like lightning, it struck. His arm swung fast, furious, and with terrifying precision. She hit the floor before I could even scream. I ran. Not toward her. Not toward him. I froze, the way prey does when the predator bares its teeth. She didn't make a sound. That still haunts me. Silence, even in pain. Especially in pain. My father didn't even check on her. He looked at me, just looked, and walked away like nothing had happened. I didn't know it yet, but in that moment, the version of him I had believed in, died. What makes a man do that to someone he once vowed to protect? What makes a child testify against her own father? And how can someone smile, actually smile, as their daughter recounts the worst night of her life in a courtroom? This is the story of the night that shattered my childhood, the trial that divided my family, and the years of silence I had to crawl through just to speak it aloud. But before we get to the courtroom, you need to understand how monsters don't always look like monsters, at first. Sometimes, they tuck you in at night. If any part of this story already hits home, leave a comment below. Your voice matters more than you know. And if you want more real stories from survivors who turned silence into strength, hit like and subscribe to Abuse Stories. This is where truth lives, even when it hurts. Before he broke her ribs, he broke her spirit, piece by piece, over years. To everyone else, my father was magnetic. He had that charm that made people lean in when he spoke. At barbecues, he was the one telling jokes. At school events, other parents called him the cool dad. And when he held my hand walking me to school, he smiled at teachers like he was made of love. Behind closed doors, though, he was different, quieter. He didn't yell often, that would have made it too obvious. Instead, he used disappointment like a weapon, cold eyes, lingering silence. Little things that made my mom flinch, and me, second guess every step I took. He never hit her in front of me, not at first. That came later. At the beginning, it was things no one else saw, the way he criticized how she cooked, the way he controlled where she went, the way he read her texts over her shoulder. He'd call it just being protective. She'd call it love. I called it normal, because it was all I knew. My mom started shrinking. Not physically, emotionally. She stopped dressing up. She stopped inviting friends over. She stopped laughing out loud. There were times I'd catch her staring out the window with this faraway look, like she was somewhere else, someone else. And I didn't have the words then, but I knew, something was very wrong. Sometimes she'd get quiet during dinner, and he'd tap his fork against his plate. Just once. That was his signal. And like clockwork, she'd snap back to attention, smiling like nothing happened. I started doing it too, the smiling, pretending, laughing when I didn't feel like it, walking on eggshells so hard I forgot how it felt to walk normally. And yet, some days were okay. Some days, he brought home pizza. He'd kiss her cheek. He'd say he was just stressed and tell me I was his princess. Those were the days that made the bad ones harder to understand. Because how could someone who sings along to the radio with you turn around and become something you fear? There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't come from words, it comes from confusion. When love and fear share the same face, you start to doubt your instincts. I remember feeling guilty just for thinking something might be wrong. There was one night he told her, "You're lucky I'm still here." He said it so casually, so confidently. She didn't even react. And that scared me more than if she had cried. He never laid a hand on me. Never screamed at me. I was the golden child, untouched. But I saw everything. Every moment of control, every flicker of fear in my mother's eyes. I absorbed it all in silence. And deep down, I knew, it was only a matter of time before he stopped using words. It started with a glass of wine. My mom had just poured herself one, not even halfway full. She was humming to herself, something soft, maybe a song from the radio. I remember thinking it was strange because she hadn't done that in a long time. But for a moment, it felt almost peaceful. Then the front door slammed. I jumped. She stopped humming. He walked in, keys jangling in his hand, shoulders stiff, jaw set. I don't remember the words he used, but I remember the tone, sharp, already angry. Something about her not answering her phone. Something about dinner not being ready. She offered him the wine, gently, like it might calm him. He took it, looked at it, and then threw it, straight into the wall. Glass shattered everywhere. I was sitting on the floor with my math homework. I didn't even move, just stared. He started yelling. She tried to walk away. That's when he grabbed her arm. Not hard at first, but hard enough that she winced. "Don't you walk away from me," he said. That's when I stood up. I didn't know what I was going to do. Maybe I thought I could stop it. But the second I moved, his eyes flicked to me. "Sit down," he barked. I didn't. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move either way. Then it happened. He shoved her. Just once, but hard. She hit the corner of the counter. I heard her gasp. Not cry, gasp. Like all the air got knocked out of her. She tried to push back. Not to hurt him, just to escape. But that was enough. He snapped. His fists, 1, 2, 3, landed with a sound I will never forget. Dull thuds. Then the crack. A sickening, hollow crack that echoed through the kitchen. She crumpled. I screamed. I remember running to her, but he grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back. "Don't touch her," he hissed. Then the front door opened. It was my neighbor, an older woman who must have heard the glass breaking or my scream. She didn't even knock. She just came in and saw the scene. She called 911 right there. The next part is a blur. Sirens. Lights. Police officers in our living room. I remember one kneeling next to my mom, asking her questions she couldn't answer through the pain. They put him in handcuffs. I remember the clicking sound. And I remember looking at his face. He wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. He was smirking. Like this was just another inconvenience. Like getting arrested was a joke. Like none of this mattered. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He didn't think he did anything wrong. The officers asked me questions. I don't remember what I said. I just remember my voice shaking, my hands going numb, my brain trying to make sense of something it couldn't. Someone gave me a blanket. Someone led me to the couch. Someone else wrote things down on a clipboard. But none of that registered. What I remember is her, lying on the floor, barely conscious. Blood on her lips. Her breathing shallow. Her hand twitching. And what I remember more than anything was wishing I had done something. Anything. The guilt swallowed me whole. Even though I was a child. Even though it wasn't my fault. I felt like I had failed her. The EMTs came. They loaded her onto a stretcher. I asked if I could ride with her, but they said no. I watched the ambulance doors close. The sirens faded into the distance. And then the house was quiet. I was left alone with my thoughts, surrounded by broken glass, blood on the floor, and the echo of everything I never wanted to remember. That night changed everything. Not just because my mom ended up in the hospital. Not just because my dad was taken away. But because the world stopped making sense. I had spent years making excuses for him, convincing myself it wasn't that bad. That he didn't mean it. That he loved us, really. But that night stripped away every lie I had clung to. And all that was left was fear. Fear. And the weight of what came next. The bruises faded before the silence did. My mom came home from the hospital with fractured ribs, a concussion, and a prescription for painkillers, but no words. We didn't talk about it. Not the beating, not the arrest, not the fact that our lives had detonated overnight. She moved slower now. Winced every time she breathed too deep. Slept with the lights on. But when people called to check in, she lied. Said she had a fall in the kitchen. I watched her say those words with a straight face, as if they hadn't already cracked her ribs and nearly taken her life. And I said nothing. Because I didn't know how to say anything. I was 11 years old. I didn't have the language for trauma or survival or betrayal. All I knew was that my house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place full of landmines, and silence was the only way to avoid setting them off. Family came around, cautiously. Some offered help. Others didn't say a word about what happened. I overheard one aunt whisper, "She should have known better." He's always had a temper. That was the first time I realized people would rather judge than protect. Even worse were the ones who made excuses. He was under stress. He didn't mean it. He just snapped. They spoke like it was a moment of weakness, not a pattern. Like this was an accident, not a cycle. But the worst thing anyone said, the one sentence that buried itself in my chest, came from a cousin who told me, "You're lucky he never hit you." As if that made any of it okay. I may not have had bruises, but I was bleeding in ways no one could see. I couldn't focus at school. I flinched when doors closed too loud. I stopped speaking up in class. Every sound, every glance, felt like a threat. And still, I didn't tell anyone. Not the teachers. Not my friends. Not even the counselor I was forced to see once a week, who smiled too much and asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. Because silence is safer. It protects you from being doubted, judged, blamed. It keeps people from looking at you like you're damaged. But silence also kills. It kills trust. It kills connection. It kills you from the inside out. And eventually, something inside me broke. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was a small one. I found my mom crying in the laundry room. Just her and the buzz of the dryer. She didn't see me, but I watched her fall to her knees and press her hand to her ribs, not from pain, but from the memory of it. I realized then, if I kept quiet, nothing would change. If I stayed silent, I'd be part of the same system that let him hurt her in the first place. So I told my mom I wanted to testify. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. She told me I didn't have to. That it wasn't my responsibility. That it was too much. But I insisted. Because the silence was already too much. And it was slowly killing us both. And deep down, I wanted him to hear the truth, from me. The courtroom looked nothing like I expected. No drama, no shouting, no slamming gavels. Just cold air, wooden benches, and silence so thick it made me sweat. I was 12 by then. Small for my age. They gave me a booster seat because I couldn't see over the railing. That should tell you everything you need to know about how out of place I felt. He was already there when we walked in. Wearing a suit, clean-shaven, calm. Like he belonged there. He looked at me. Smiled. Not wide, not friendly. Just enough to say, "You remember who's in control." I looked away. The judge asked if I knew why I was there. I nodded. The DA had explained everything to me. But no one can really explain how it feels to testify against your father. They called my name. I walked slowly to the stand. I could feel every eye in the room on me, like the air itself was watching. When I sat down, my legs were shaking so badly I thought the whole chair would rattle. They had me swear to tell the truth. I said the words, but my throat felt dry, like they got stuck halfway out. Then the questions started. "Do you remember the night of the incident?" I nodded. "Can you tell us what you saw?" Everything in me wanted to vanish. But I didn't. I spoke. I told them about the glass, the shouting, the first shove, the punches, the way her body hit the floor. I told them how he grabbed my shoulder when I tried to help her. And I told them about the smile, that awful smile, when the handcuffs clicked. I was shaking, crying, but I kept going. Because every word I said was another cut in the lie he built around us. Every sentence made it harder for him to pretend. Then it was his lawyer's turn. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. But her questions had knives hidden in them. "Could it be you misremembered? Did anyone tell you what to say? Are you sure that's how it happened?" I felt my face burn with frustration. I wasn't confused. I wasn't mistaken. I was a kid who watched her mother nearly die. But I answered every question. Calm, clear, certain. And the more I spoke, the more he shrank. Not physically, just presence. His smirk faded. His shoulders stiffened. For the first time, I think he realized he couldn't scare me into silence anymore. I remember glancing at the jury. Some looked angry. Others just sad. But none of them looked skeptical. They believed me. That mattered more than I expected. Because for years, I had convinced myself that if I told the truth, no one would listen. That they'd say it wasn't that bad. That I was overreacting. But they were listening. And something changed in me right there on that wooden seat. I stopped being afraid of him. Because I realized, he could hurt bodies, but not truth. Not anymore. He had taken so much from us, our safety, our peace, our voice. And now, with every word I spoke, I was reclaiming a little of that back. When I finished, I looked at my mom. She was crying, hands over her mouth, but not in pain, in pride. I didn't win anything that day. No trophies. No standing ovations. But I walked out of that courtroom with my head high. And that was the first time in a long time I felt strong. Because the worst thing he ever did to us wasn't the bruises. It was the silence he forced us to live in. And in that courtroom, I shattered it. The verdict came in quietly. No gasps. No cheers. Just the sound of papers shuffling and the judge's voice cutting through the stillness. Guilty. He didn't flinch. Didn't protest. Just stood there, hands clasped behind his back, as if this was all just routine. As if none of it mattered. I thought I'd feel victorious. Like something big and bright would rise inside me. Justice, maybe. Relief. But all I felt was empty. Because nothing about this felt like winning. Yes, he was going to prison. Yes, the system worked, for once. But that didn't erase what happened. It didn't undo the damage. It didn't rebuild what he had torn apart. My mom gripped my hand tightly, like she was afraid I might slip away. Her ribs were still healing. So were mine, the invisible kind. We walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, but it didn't feel warm. It felt sharp, like everything was still too raw to enjoy. Reporters stood on the sidewalk, snapping pictures, whispering to each other. We kept our heads down. Because even though we told the truth, it didn't feel like our story anymore. It belonged to the world now. The family split after that. Some called us brave. Others called us liars. Some never spoke to us again. One uncle even said, "You ruined his life." And I wanted to scream. He ruined his own life. But I didn't scream. I was tired of screaming. In the weeks that followed, people asked how I was doing. I told them I was okay. What I really meant was, I'm still here. That's all I could manage some days, being here. Surviving. There was no parade. No justice fairy dust. Just paperwork, therapy appointments, schoolwork, and the slow, painful process of living with truth. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake wondering what he was doing in his cell. If he missed us. If he regretted anything. But deep down, I knew the truth. He didn't. And that's what hurt the most. Still, I'd do it all again. Because even though it didn't fix everything, it stopped him. And that matters more than anyone knows. Everyone talks about justice. No one talks about what comes after. Healing sounds like a clean process. Like once the verdict is read, the hard part is over. But it's not. It's just different. After the trial, I expected things to get better quickly. They didn't. I couldn't sleep without a nightlight. Loud voices made me flinch. I avoided mirrors, because some days I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. She looked tired. Older. Like someone who had lived too many lives in too few years. Therapy helped, eventually. But not right away. The first few sessions were awkward. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to relive it. I just wanted to forget. But trauma doesn't care about what you want. It lives in your bones, in your breath, in the way your heart races when nothing's wrong. My therapist taught me how to breathe through panic. How to name the feelings that used to just swirl like a storm in my chest. She never pushed. Just waited. And slowly, I opened up. I started writing things down. In journals. On napkins. In the notes app on my phone. Not for anyone else, just for me. Writing gave me back my voice. My mom and I grew closer too. We had hard days, yes. But also good ones. We'd cook together. Watch movies in bed. Celebrate the little things, like getting through the week without a nightmare. Sometimes we cried without needing a reason. Other times, we laughed louder than we had in years. Trust was the hardest thing. Not just in others, in myself. I questioned everything, my memories, my instincts, my worth. But healing meant learning to trust myself again. To believe that what I saw was real, and that my feelings were valid. There were setbacks. Triggers. Days when the world felt heavy. But there were also small victories. Laughing without guilt. Sleeping through the night, answering, "I'm okay," and meaning it. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a spiral, forward, backward, and sometimes just in circles. But slowly, the circle widened. And I began to breathe again. I wasn't whole yet, but I was no longer broken in silence. If I had to do it all over again, the testimony, the judgment, the fear, I would. Because silence protects no one. Speaking up didn't just save my mom. It saved me too. To anyone out there holding back their truth, I see you. You're not alone. Your voice has power. And sometimes, that voice is the beginning of everything getting better. If this story meant something to you, subscribe for more. Your story matters too. And we're here to listen.